our first story today, we're joined by Alex Newman, our international correspondent. Alex, just when you think California can't get any freakier, it does. Our first story today is you have actually lawmakers in California who are proposing a bill, an actual bill, that would allow child rapists, if they're LGBTQ, to not have to register as sex offenders. Explain that for us.
I keep saying it. Just when you think California can't get any nuttier, any more ridiculous, somehow they managed to prove you wrong. And so now they've got this legislation. And apparently all the Democrats agree, and even some of the Republicans agree, that if you're a child rapist and you're a homosexual or a transgender or something like that, and there's 10 years or less of age difference, then you shouldn't necessarily have to register on the sex offender registry. So if you're a 24-year-old homosexual raping a 14-year-old boy, we can just leave it up to the nutty California judge to decide whether you really belong in the sex offender registry. And I think it's a good illustration of where the state of California is going.
Well, the scary part about this for me, Alex, is why in the world would you make that discriminatory distinction? So if you happen to be lesbian, bisexual, gay, or transgender, there's a different set of sexual rules for you than if you're homosexual? What would be the I mean, I think I know the answer to this. That's the privileged category, and you boring heterosexual people should be punished. But explain to me what their thinking is to the best of your knowledge.
Yeah, well, as I understand it, they're marketing this actually as a non-discrimination bill because they argue that, hey, you know, a 20-year-old man could theoretically have a relationship with a 17-year-old girl. They might get married, and you know, we wouldn't call that statutory rape. And so why should a 24-year-old homosexual man who rapes a 14-year-old boy be considered a child rapist if the 14-year-old boy consented to it? So it's really very twisted logic, but you know, nobody ever accused California lawmakers of being terribly sensible or logical.
Well, you know, you could get in trouble in California if you have a 17-year-old girl and a 24-year-old man. It's probable that California would not prosecute that all the way, but it's still prosecutable, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And it would be up to the discretion of the judge in that case whether they add the person to the sex offender registry. So.
And is there any rhetoric? I mean, they call it non-discrimination. So the implication seems to be that there is a different sexual standards for lesbians, bisexual, gays, and transgender. There seems to be this argument that in that community, the alphabet community, to use the way it's been phrased by Dave Chappelle, the comedian, the alphabet community apparently has greater latitude, or they're more sophisticated, or children who are LGBTQ gay, if they're attracted to adults, we have to give them more leeway to have sex with adults because, you know, they're minorities or victims. What if you had to answer this one way, what would be your argument?
Yeah, and that's really what they are arguing. They're saying, you know, we used to think sodomy was bad, and so that's reflected in our laws. But now we know sodomy is just totally fine and totally normal and totally healthy. You know, it's practically the same thing as heterosexual intercourse between a married couple, and so we should update our laws to reflect that. Now, you know, it's important to point out that even one of the key Democrats here has rejected this logic and has said that no, you know, there's no way we're going to do this and practically legalize or at least come close to decriminalizing rape between a grown man and a young boy. But this is where they're going with this, and you know, we've talked about on this show before, Duke. They're now trying to normalize pedophilia in California. So, you know, with each day that passes, they knock down more and more barriers, and that's where this is ultimately headed. Yeah,
this reminds me of the gay marriage debate of 10, 12 years ago when we were told, no, this is just two male or two females who want to marry. They support monogamy. This is not going to become more about polyamory. And how dare you suggest that it's a slippery slope, that if we allow two men to marry, that you're going to get polyamory, or that if you get two women to marry, pretty soon you're going to be getting demands for adults to marry children. That would never happen. It's offensive. Here it is. And the argument seems to be, as we said before, that pedophilia is all in the head, right? And that when it comes to people who are already brave enough to be lesbian, bisexual, or transgender, or gay, they have a kind of a greater understanding. They're freer and more open about sex than heterosexual people, so we should give them an entirely separate standard than we do traditional heterosexual people.
Yeah, and that's where this is going. I mean, if you just project the lines forward, you see that this is going very, very nasty places. And as we all know, what happens in California eventually spreads out across the country. This is not going to end well.
No, and I think in a court of law, if California passed this law and then it went to a federal court, And the premise of the lawsuit was not, do they have the right to do this in California? The premise of the lawsuit was, is it discriminatory to allow LGBTQ people to have greater discretion and not heterosexual people? I almost 100% guarantee you that they would find that it was illegal to discriminate against heterosexual people, and the law would have to be broadened to apply to heterosexual rapists of younger children as well.
Yep, no doubt about it.
And before I sign off here, let's be clear. You and I are using the term rape, right? Because we understand that when an adult has sex with a child, that child can't consent. But they wouldn't call it rape, right? So when we say child rapist, we should step back for a second and just point something else out. If you have a 9-year-old boy under this law, possibly, and a 19-year-old man, or a 21-year-old man and an 11-year-old boy, and they have sex together, it's because it's not rape, because it's consensual. Then the 11-year-old boy, we are conferring the ability to consent on young people if a judge agrees with that.
Exactly. And, we don't let 14-year-old or 12-year-old or 15-year-old children vote. We don't let them smoke. We don't let them drive. We don't let them, serve in the military. We don't let them buy weapons. And suddenly we're saying it's okay for them to consent to have potentially, life-destroying sexual activities with an adult. It's absolutely crazy. It's absolutely sick. But I really do think it offers a lot of insight into what's going on in the minds of California's legislators and the special interest groups that are moving all of this forward.
Well, and look, if we allow a 5 or 7-year-old to determine its own gender, even to the point of having hormone therapy, why can't they then, if they can choose to alter their bodies, they can choose to reject their biological gender and sex and become, through even surgery in some cases, somebody else at the age of 13 or 14, well, then why can't they pick who they have sex with, right? This is going to end very badly, as you say. And just because there are a couple Democrats now who find this outrageous, it's California. And sooner or later, you're going to shame anybody who has this idea into voting the way you want them to. It's a disgusting story, Alex, and it's only going to get worse. It's going to get worse. All we can do is continue to sound the alarm, and you do it as well as anybody. Thanks for joining us today.